Welcome to Discovering. There are 333 deer farms in the state of Michigan. We'll take a look at one right here in the Upper Peninsula. Then we're back at the Superior View Studios with Jack Deo, this time for a look at some vintage deer hunting and camp photos. Stick around, that's all tonight right here on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forests thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Cattle farming, sheep farming, pig farming, deer farming. Deer farming has actually been around for centuries, but the real growth has occurred only in the last 20 years. Michigan's 333 licensed captive cervid farms are regulated by the DNR and the Department of Agriculture, and are subject to strict regulations regarding fencing, disease testing, and more. Deer can be raised as livestock for food, for hunting preserves, or for breeding purposes the same way horses are put out for a stud fee. I'm guessing it all starts with the enjoyment of being around deer. I sat down with Matt Dajna of Camp Dodge to find out more.
When we put this up, I thought I was a pretty good whitetail hunter. I was kind of a whitetail fanatic, as most of my friends would tell you, or people that I hunted with tell you I was a little bit over the edge with deer and things. Once we put this fence up, I realized how many things I didn't know. This became like a great big science project. We didn't shoot everything that we saw. We started to watch deer, and you started to see deer, and you'd come up with ideas of what you were thinking was going to happen, or things that weren't going to happen, and all of a sudden, boy, you'd be completely wrong, because this is, like I say, it's a huge, huge science project. When I first started to try and trap coyotes, an old timer told me, he said, boy, he said, you might never get through to raccoons and skunks because you got such a good feed program here. He said, you might never get your trap in the ground long enough to catch a coyote. So we started to trap raccoons. In those first couple of years, we got a very large number of raccoons that we were able to eradicate off of the property that were just continually on our feeders. We had pictures of them. So we trapped and we caught raccoon after raccoon, and all of a sudden our food usage almost doubled. And after you go back and you look at it, all of a sudden you had a bunch of fawns around the tray at the feeder. And obviously 5-6 fawns are going to eat more than 5 or 6 raccoons. Our fawns weren't starving. They were meandering off through the food plots, eating plenty of different things, but they weren't getting the high protein pellets that we wanted them to get. The raccoons were monopolizing those feeders. The next thing that happened is, oh my God, all sorts of partridge, all sorts of turkeys, all sorts of ducks, because when our rabbit population went up, all the small game stuff that you're looking to shoot or the grandkids are looking to shoot, once you start managing for whitetail, everything else flourishes. But you have to take care of those rodents, you have to take care of those predators, and I know a lot of areas, everyone will say they're overrun with coyotes, or overrun with raccoons and things like that. Well, you can affect your own little part of the world and get a quality deer management program going right there with just a few acres if you really start focusing on it and looking at it all year long. So.
It's not a fenced-in shooting preserve, it's more of a fenced-in controlled habitat. You know, some guys in small pens and some guys have big pens. I don't fault anybody for a hunting opportunity in any particular size pen. It's, you know, it's based on their own ability, what they really want to accomplish. When you go hunt in Texas, a lot of the exotics and a lot of the deer there are on high fence game ranches. You go hunt in Africa and most of those are high fence game ranches. With this being a 1,500 acre fenced in habitat, it really is a true habitat for deer. The reproduction's natural, the chase is natural. Here's a nice walk right here.
The state of Michigan registers deer farms in 3 different categories. One being an exhibition, like a zoo type facility. One being a full registration for breeding, able to sell live deer to other facilities, and then a ranch facility, and that's what we are. In that facility, we sell hunts a couple weeks a year for big whitetail, bring guests in to pursue that deer of their dreams. So when we fence this, we put up, the first edition was 760 acres. It translated into about 4.5 miles of fence. We've since expanded. We're just shy of 1,500 acres, and we have just shy of 10 miles of exterior fence.
DNR comes up and does a fence inspection every 3 years. And both the last 2 inspections, they were overly impressed and noted the predator control measures that we were taking and the fence integrity with the electricity and the apron and gravel and stuff at the base, trying to keep the integrity of the fence all the way to the ground. You don't want anything coming in or out once you're managing your own herd and genetics. You notice it's a woven wire, smaller squares down by the bottom, and then it graduates up to a full 6 by 6 inch square. So we chose to go on the first full-size square coming up with the electricity. Gives us some room for snow, weeds, but yet anything that could fit through the full-size square isn't coming through. So we deal with small stuff, fox, bobcat, small coyotes come through, but anything else has got to come either under or over. Well, if he comes under, you know he came because there's a hole, there's evidence, and you can fill it, and you can target it, you can try and trap it or kill it. If he comes over, there's absolutely very little evidence other than maybe a bend in the fence or some hair on the fence, which is real hard to find. With the 2 wires of electricity, nobody climbs over anymore. The red lights are just a pulse to verify that the electricity's on. They're stationed around the fence at different spots. After we built the fence, the deer would literally walk right up next to the fence. Coyotes and bobcats and everything else would be right there in the deer trail. Of course, they're following the food to the restaurant. The food's at the end of the track. Now we put the electricity up, and it's amazing. The deer have moved 10 to 15 feet away from our fence. They're down in the ditches, they're across the ditches, and as we've proven with the snow, there's almost nobody walks up next to the fence. Now the coyote doesn't walk up by the fence. Now the bobcat doesn't walk by the fence because, again, he's following food. He's down in that deer trail. We think we're getting less and less ingress from the outside. You can see right here on the fence, there's some of the predator apron laying on the ground. So we put this on the inside, graveled over the top of it, and that was our solution to prevent digging, and that pretty much worked. When we put the back section on, and we actually put the apron on both sides, so it's about 1.5 feet on each side. Again, you learn every day in this business, and the electricity is just one more part of those learning curves.
When we put deer in the first section, we bought deer from Lower Michigan down around Midland, and we started that strain of genetics, and we actually had Dr. Kroll, Dr. Deer up here. He says the whitetail genetics are changing continually throughout the reproduction, and you really don't need to introduce more stuff. You just need to continually cull out the genetics, the smaller 8-pointers, the things that you don't want in a herd, and that the genetics will just continue to evolve upward. But so far it's been working pretty good. And when we did the expansion, we put deer in actually 3 different times. We put them in the second time in the back section.
Bought a different genetic set of deer back here, and there's more non-typical, not real grossly non-typical, but some non-typical stickers and drops.
You can see one of them over here on the wall, 20-some points at 3 years old, and he was killed the following year in velvet by a coyote. Lots of different genetics within the herd.
We keep the gates shut between them. We know that anytime we want to change genetics, we can leave the gates open for a little bit, close them back up, and we've crossed genetics.
And then December will be 4 years ago, we actually put a 40-acre test pen together.
Here's where we tested the electricity theory, and we put the chicken wire up 4 feet, all the way down to the ground. So now in this 40-acre pen, nothing can get through. No predators, no porcupines, no raccoons. Nothing's coming through the fence below that hot wire, and we're pretty sure that nothing's crawling over it.
Put in 6 bucks and 12 pregnant does, and we've been letting it grow for about 4 years, trying to keep a predator-free 40-acre pen. It is a continual learning process, but you look at those genetics and you look at the deer in that 40-acre pen and the things that we've learned from that and how they've developed. It's absolutely amazing what you see. You just learn so much about individual deer. That first year when they had horns, one of those deer was a perfect endpointer. His first set of antlers at 1.5 years old. And you can see his G2s almost had the kickers, making them 12. But he's 1 year old. His bases are small. There's no mass. There's no diameter. and every other deer in there was a spike horn, anywhere from about 9 inches down to about 5 inches. I've got some of the sheds from the following year when they were 2 years old in there, and those spike horns that were in there were just phenomenal. One was a massive drop tine or drop paddles on both sides, probably 6 to 7 inch drops. Another one had double row of tines down both beams. He still doesn't have the mass. He's only 2. And again, now they're fed well, and it's just amazing to see what happened there in 1 year of antler growth. That old theory of once a spike, always a spike, shoot those spike horns, get rid of them, absolutely not true with what we've seen in that little test pen. So, and I know for sure because they all had a tag in their ear. It was pretty easy to tell. He's only 2, it's his second set of horns. When you go find those sheds, you know exactly who it is and how old he is when you're dealing with animals in a small pen like that. So. You're allowed to feed the deer at whatever level you want. We feed a high protein based pellet. We plant a lot of food plots, and we supplement with sugar beets and veggies or potatoes, whatever we can throughout the year. Big round bales, alfalfa, because you have to get the deer fat. You have to get their body up to the maximum weight before you can even expect their antlers to start to grow.
So most of these moat areas are food plots. Everything's set with a base of clover. Now these are ready to get replanted again. But we put like a Ladina clover or some type of clover in with every food plot. Might plant something that's good for 1 year, but after you go the second year and that clover comes up, you top it off and you get 3-4 years out of a good food plot.
So that's the type of pellet that we're feeding. It's a high protein based, vegetable based pellet designed to put antler growth and mass on the animal. And as you can see, the feeder, the more they continue to take off the tray, the more it just continues to come out. So again, no batteries, no electricity, very low maintenance. Hard rain, sleety snow, you might have to come and unclog the feeder. They might freeze up a little bit, but in the winter you adjust them a little bit. Sight glasses on the side of the feeder so you can go by quickly and see where your food level is on the feeder. Once their body's at a full weight, the stress is reduced, the food count and quality is up, all of a sudden you start to get some really big antlers. A deer from age 1 to age 3 is absolutely a night and day difference. And most of the deer we shoot in the wild are young deer, starved deer or underfed deer, so they've never got that full antler potential like we're able to develop in here. All right, here's a series of sheds from the same deer, 3 different years in a row. You can see the little bends and bumps here, and the following year, what they turned into. Now this is the same deer that I'm gonna say is 2 right here. He's 3 on this set. He's 4 here. And we killed that deer the following year when he was 5.5 years old, and he taped over 204 inches and had a lot of points and a lot more mass than he's got right here. You know, this is a big project of management, so you're looking at bucks that you want to come out, and you're looking at does that you want to come out of the herd and things like that, because you know, generally the big mature doe isn't the thing that's targeted by the predator. So recently here last month we had the Wheel and Sportsman program up. We brought 22 guys up over the course of 4 days. It was strictly a mature doe hunt. We got those deer out and processed. Actually, we had the vet pull brain stems and lymph nodes so we could send those in for CWD testing. As a registered farm, we're required to do a certain percentage of CWD testing, and all came back negative already. But again, part of the management is eliminating deer, and getting rid of that big mature doe is something that we have to do, and that's a great program to do it with. And we found out that through the course of time, the predators rarely kill the big doe. They're opportunistic, but generally it seems what we're finding is they work their way through the herd at different times of the year, targeting different animals. They target that fawn, of course, right away in the spring. They actually get the buck fawn first. He's more curious, he's further from mom, and when nurture kicks in, mom's protecting the one she can, and that's usually the doe fawn because she's closer. After they've isolated and killed the buck fawn, it seems like the doe fawn's next. About that time, the big mature bucks are starting to get horns and they're in velvet. They don't fight with their horns in velvet, they're full blood or are sensitive. So now he's prime and easy for a coyote to attack. November rolls around, they're chasing the does. Pretty soon those bucks get tired right out. So the coyotes pick on that mature buck right after the rut, after he's been beat up from fighting and breeding. He's just wore right out. The doe, that's a different story. We've all seen that doe stand up on her hind legs in the bait pile and whack somebody in the head or stand up and box with another doe. She's learned to fight with her hoofs all year long, and we're finding that that mature doe lives longer than anyone else inside the fence, and I believe probably outside the fence, because she knows how to fight. Where big bucks inside the fence or outside the fence are still susceptible to everything else. We're regulated by the DNR and by the Department of Agriculture. The deer is actually a cow in the state's eyes. So there's no hunting license required. We pay our fees to be a ranch, but there's no license out of state or in state. There's no seasons. Again, there's no age limit on the animal or the hunter. We shoot 365 days a year. So again, there's no limit. So if somebody wanted to come and shoot 2 or 3 deer at a crack, they could. They just pay again for the next one. Most of our clients are guests, are repeat guests and customers. They've all become friends and hunting partners. So we've got a nice setup here. We've got the main lodge where we stay. We feed all the hunters here. The cook stays here. The guides will stay here. And then we have another lodge on the property that'll sleep up to the 6 hunters. Full kitchen and facilities over there. And they don't get the luxury of having a phone or an internet service, which we at least have at the main lodge. But generally when they come up here to hunt, they just want to be connected for as little as they possibly need to check on their business. And then they're back out in the woods again. They're coming here for the experience to see the deer, to maybe find that deer of a lifetime, and to learn as much as they can. They have a great time on the property. Learning all about the deer and the property is all part of the hunting experience.
The traditions of deer hunting and deer camp go back far beyond the years of any of us alive today. Here's a look at some great photos from the collection of Jack Deo, Superior View Studio.
Hunting goes way back here in Marquette. Some of the most famous Marquette residents, J.M. Longyear was a hunter, Peter White had a camp where he was a hunter, and a lot of people don't know that. One of the greatest guides was Jack Lafitte. Jack Lafitte had a famous spot out in Whitefish Lake in Deerton. Jack Lapitte's father was a famous guide, Louis Nolan, who took men around the lake in the 1870s. And his wigwam here in Marquette with Charlie Caboggum, Jack Lafitte standing there. These are some hunters from England who came all the way to the UP to hunt deer, and this is the camp out at Whitefish in Deerton. And a famous camp that's still there today. Even in the winter they'd go out to these camps. A famous shot of Frederick Charlton, the famous architect of Marquette who built most of our famous buildings. And there's some shots of some of the buck poles out there. But it wasn't just men who were hunting deer. We have some great shots of lady hunters. And these are not women just posing with deer. These are women who shot their deer, from the stories I heard and from the families that brought me these photographs. I love this one of Mrs. Spear. You've heard of Spear and Sons of Marquette, a famous old family. Great shots of women with their deer and their bear. One of my favorite albums is a group of hunters that came to the UP from Chicago. And here they are on the boat coming over from Chicago to over Lake Michigan. They hunted in the Trinary area. Here they are waiting for the Trinary train at Rapid River. The great thing about this series of photographs is that they're all taken by this man right here with a shutter worked by an air bulb. You see the cord, and you see the bulb in his hand, kind of like a selfie today. Getting near Trinary, everybody pickled. So here's some men coming to the UP. They got to stay in a cabin at Round Lake in Elder County, owned by a man named Indian Leary. Here's some shots of them at the Indian Leary camp near Trinary. And here they are having their meal, typical deer camp inside the night before deer camp, having their beers, sitting around, all the clothes, the clocks. Between supper and bedtime, playing cards. You remember, no TVs, no even radios back when these pictures were taken in 1914. They went into town to have a little fun. Here's the Trinary Society. Here's all these young men from Chicago mingling with the city girls. Here's the fair storekeepers. And of course, the pick of the town. And then literally, they walked from Trinary to Munising. Stayed in all the abandoned hunting camps and logging camps along the way. They got into Grand Island, and all these camps are abandoned, and you could just stay at them as you walk. The game preserve out at Grand Island, this was when CCI owned Grand Island and had all these exotic species of animals out there. These men from Detroit weren't just ordinary men. They were very wealthy. They owned what was called the Star Line, one of the biggest boat lines in Detroit. Here they are, they arrived by wagon. What's neat about this is one of the men has brought his clock with him, a regular mantle clock. And I just love a shot of the night before deer camp. All the men sitting around, having a drink, having a cigar, smoking a pipe. Here's the old wood stove and all the things hanging and all the pots and pans. Look at this building. I mean, this wasn't trimmed off or anything. This is the Perry Camp in Rapid River. Another one of my favorite camps is out in the Seney Plains and the Seney Stretch. You can see the ever-present beer bottles being. You're sort of a smorgasbord. You got deer hanging, you have partridge hanging, you have rabbits hanging. This is a shot taken in Escanaba, and you can see the deer on the porch hanging. And one of my favorite shots, 30 deer hanging, 10 men, and this is also an Escanaba scene from the 1890s. Another classic deer camp scene from Marquette County. Here's another shot of that camp. And one of the greatest shots of big bucks hanging from the 1940s here in Marquette County. This shot probably shows the biggest bucks I've ever seen in an old photograph. These are monster deer. I counted 16 points on this deer, and a lot of these were taken at railroad stations because they were shipping deer so often. Before the bridge was built, everything had to go by ferry to Mackinac City. So some of these amazing shots called shipping deer. When the Mackinac Bridge was built, the deer were kind of confused. One of the first deer to cross the bridge by walking over. And since the Mackinac Bridge was built in 1957, they have kept track of all the deer crossing the bridge. And this is a photograph of the very first deer going across the bridge in 1957. And I'll tell you, nothing's better than the friends and the camaraderie of deer camp. And here's two men who both got their beautiful bucks and are shaking hands over it. So quite a tradition. And the friends you make at deer camp are your friends forever.
Superior View is located at Art of Framing, 149 West Washington Street in downtown Marquette. Photographs are also available online at viewsofthepast.com. Take a drive to Hilltop RV in Escanaba this Friday night for the Trails and Tales Outdoors Radio and Kicks Country Deer Poll. If I don't see you there, I'll see you Monday night right here on Discovering.